is a small but mighty family-led property management and letting agency based in Edinburgh, and we have a wider range of landlords and a whole suite of services tailored to our landlords. We are often asked, why should I use your full management service? So I thought it might be helpful really just to explain a little bit about the rationale behind this decision. When it comes down to compliance, I think the expression, you don't know what you don't know, is incredibly apt when it comes to property lettings. When I first let out my first property, I think about 20 years ago, there were very few boxes to tick. I think I issued a 2-page lease, an AT5 form, and I think I was quite unique in that I even issued an inventory, and I think it ran to about half a page. And that was it. It was really straightforward. However, over the last 10 years in particular, the number of boxes that you have to tick has really risen exponentially, and at such a pace that even a really conscientious self-managing landlord could easily miss one aspect of it because it's just not their full-time day job. Now, for example, now you have to lodge your tenant's deposit with one of 3 government-approved schemes, and you have to do that within 30 working days of the tenancy starting. Now, it could be very easy for you to either not realise you have to do that or just forget to do it because life's taken over and suddenly the 30-day deadline has passed. And if that happens, your tenant could apply to that scheme, and that scheme could award compensation to that tenant, which is usually up to 3 times the value of the deposit. And that amount of money is paid by the landlord to the tenant. Now, if your deposit is 1.5 or 2 times the monthly rent, that means that you could be paying out to your tenant in a fine 6 months worth of rent, and that's money you've never even seen. So it can be a very costly and stressful mistake. So in addition, the whole tenancy regime has gone through the biggest overhaul in 30 years. And although we found it to be working surprisingly well, we've been able to adapt to it because we've been really involved in the 4-year consultation that's led up to its inception. Now, due to the changes in the legislation, due to the notice periods and rights for both landlords and tenants, there are a lot more things to consider, not only when you're setting up the initial let, but how you're going to manage that tenancy all the way through. And if you didn't really understand the impacts of the legislation, you could be exposing yourself to lots of issues, and given that you're not aware of your new responsibilities and rights. Now, because at Chapmans, we're full-time property managers and we're doing this day in and day out, and because we keep ourselves fully up to date with the legislation, and because we build in systems to help us make reminders, to make sure we don't miss anything, we make sure we cover everything so that you don't have to. So landlords who use our full management service benefit from a range of additional services, but one of the best one has to be that we're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for your tenants, so you don't need to be. You can never tell when there's going to be an emergency, a boiler breakdown, a flood, a leak or something like that, but you can absolutely guarantee it's not going to happen at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. It's more than likely to be at 3 o'clock in the morning, or just as you're about to step on an aeroplane to go on holiday, or just as you're about to get married. It's always inconvenient. So that's one thing that you don't need to worry about. Our full management clients know that their tenants will call us in the first instance, and we're the ones who have that 4 a.m. wake-up call. And we have that job of calming down your really stressed and anxious tenant and coordinating workmen. Now, often what a tenant thinks is an emergency isn't always an emergency, and it can usually wait until the next working day to avoid really expensive call-out charges, etc. But what cannot wait is the task of calming that tenant down. You've got someone who's very stressed, they're very anxious, and sometimes it's just a case of talking through what the issue is. And at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to have the sleepless night, not yours. management landlords use us for many, many reasons, but one of the key ones is time. Even if they live locally, they are usually extremely busy building their careers, running the home and the family, and they're not usually able to respond quickly to tenant queries and issues. I often ask landlords, what else could you be doing with your time if you weren't dealing with your property issues? In order to tick all the boxes for visits, maintenance, compliance, I once worked out that it takes on average 50 hours per annum per property to look after a property, and that's a straightforward property, and that doesn't include the thinking time that goes with it if you're not used to doing this as your everyday job. So what is your own hourly rate worth? What could you be using those 50 hours for? Could you use them for working on your next promotion? Could you be spending more quality time with your family? What is that time worth to you? Yes, there is a cost attached to full management, but our clients usually assess the cost in terms of an investment in maximising their top line income, minimising their costs, maximising their time saving, and keeping them compliant and safe. With regards to turning things around, when a tenant gives their notice, we have to work really hard to turn that property around quickly so as to reduce the amount of time when it's empty. Because of course, if the landlord has an empty property, they're not earning any money. But not only are they not earning any money, they're incurring costs such as council tax, gas and electricity charges, potentially if it's empty for a long time, maybe a change to avoid insurance policy. We deal with the full turnaround really, really quickly. We're poised and ready for action at all times. When that tenant moves out, we carry out that detailed checkout inspection report. We write that up, we deal with all the trades involved with sorting out any maintenance issues, any extra cleaning required, getting the new inventory done, and we deal with that deposit return process, all at the same time as finding you your new tenant and moving your new tenant in. Now, as we discussed earlier, the deposits are lodged with the tenancy deposit scheme. Now, we know how these schemes work. We're practiced with this. We do this every day. So we understand what monies we're likely to get back and what monies we aren't. And so generally we don't have a dispute. But if we do, we know how to handle that and how to manage the process. So in essence, we like to think of property lettings and full management as our full-time business, and it really shouldn't be your full-time distraction. Different agencies have different business models that work for them. However, at Chapmans, I invest really heavily in staff so that our landlords can have one point of contact for their queries. Every single property is unique, every single landlord is unique, and every single tenant is certainly unique. And therefore, it's important for a landlord to have someone who understands the full picture looking after you. If we were selling a widget that was exactly the same product every single time, with the same price tag, with the same warranty issues, then yes, a faceless, online, internet-based model works really well. However, in property lettings and management, this is a service-based industry, and you're paying for someone to look after one of your most expensive assets. You are providing a home to someone. Each building is unique in terms of build, construction, maintenance issues, etc. And you're renting this property out as a home to someone who may have very limited practical knowledge of actually looking after a property. The tenants also are all really different. Some are very relaxed about us popping in to sort out issues. Some are great at changing light bulbs and sorting out minor issues and topping up boilers, but others may not be quite so practical. Now, I don't know how someone can effectively help a landlord look after a property if they don't know who the tenants are. How can they decide on the best course of action, whether it's a rent increase, how to manage a repair, if they haven't actually taken the time to know and understand the temperament and the ability of the tenant they're actually dealing with at the other end? So an example that came up recently was an insurance issue. There was a leak into the property through a bathroom that caused some damage. Now that bathroom, because we know it well, it happened to have a redundant water tank, which was really unsightly. It blocks the light coming in and it sort of hangs down from the ceiling. Now, because we know that tenant well, because we know that property well, and because we know the landlord well, when we got the quote for the insurance, we actually asked the contractors to quote for the removal of the tank as an extra, because it would be a really sensible time to do this. And removing the tank you'd had to make good, but you're going to have to make good anyway when you're sorting out the bathroom issue. So actually it would only be a small extra cost with no more extra disruption. And so what we did then is we got the insurance to pay out on the insurance issue, and the landlord then topped up our budget, and we've been able to schedule in the works for when the tenant was on holiday. And in this way, the landlord's not had to pay for relocation costs for finding alternative accommodation for the tenant, because there's only one bathroom in there. But because we've had this joined up approach and we've tailored this solution, we're actually going to end up with a much nicer bathroom at a much more subsidised cost to the landlord. We'll have a happier tenant, and we're also going to have an improvement of the future rental value of this property, but also an eventual sale appeal. So this is how the joined up approach of knowing our landlord, our property and our tenant really helps the overall process. As a full management client, we try and manage your cash flow for you and manage your expenditure. And every month we provide you with an online statement that breaks down your income and your expenditure, which helps you keep track of your investment. But we also give access to our full management clients, access to their own client portal. And through this, among other things that they can do there, a landlord can actually generate their own statements. For example, it's coming up to the tax year end. They want to have a specific statement, not just for 1 month, but they want it from the 6th of April 2017 to the 5th of April 2018. And actually what they can do is actually generate their own statement and ledger for themselves at a time that's convenient to them, and not having to ask us and wait for us to do that for them. And what they can also do is pass that on to their accountant, which hopefully will save them time, money and stress. So we also keep track of all our landlord certificates and paperwork so that they don't have to. And really at any stage our landlords can log in and see the real-time income and expenditure of their rental account. So they'll know at the same time as us if a tenant hasn't paid. But obviously we'd always let them know about that anyway. When a client is using our full management service, we do a rental review in Q1 each year for any property that hasn't had either a new tenant in the last 18 months or a rent increase in the last 18 months. Now, we don't apply a blanket percentage rent increase across the board. We actually look at each property in turn and bear in mind the tenants that are currently in residence, both in terms of their affordability, but also their quality as tenants, and what do they mean to the landlord. So what I mean by this is that perhaps if the rental value has gone up by £100 per month, we might go back to you and say, look, the new market value is this, but our advice is one of the following: either advise to go for the full rent increase, maybe not increase it at all, or maybe to meet the tenants part way. The rationale behind this is, if you've got tenants perhaps who really look after the property, they've settled in for the long term, they're really happy to top up a quirky boiler on a monthly basis, and they know the shower is a wee bit sticky, well, actually, it might be better strategy and better relationship building to let the tenants know what the new market rental value is, but actually say to them that you're not looking for a rent increase at all because they're such good tenants, or you might say to them you're only looking for a small increase because your cost base has come up, or something like that. And in that way, by not going for the maximum, you're not going to be spurring those tenants on to go and find a new property and then suddenly finding yourself with losing these really good tenants, new marketing and lease fee costs, and then taking on tenants that you have no experience with whatsoever. So sometimes less can be more. But on the other hand, if you've got a tenant that is incredibly demanding, that is not prepared to do even the smallest jobs in the property, then actually it may not concern us too much if those tenants move out. So for those tenants, we might say, no, let's go for the full increase, because if they don't move out, well then we've got a wee bit more compensation, haven't we, to offset the fact that they're more demanding as tenants. But if they do move out, well, maybe it's not such a great loss, and we can remarket the property at that new rent and find a new tenant to bed into the property. I guess my key message for someone considering full management is to go back to my opening comments. You don't know what you don't know. By going for the full management proposition, we are offering you the best and most appropriate rents. We're offering you peace of mind. We're giving you time and confidence that we are running your property investment business on your behalf without draining you of time and energy.